shows. Hi, this is Jenny Hudson bringing you the Author Connection, the voice of independent authors. And today I have Mary Baures with us, author of Love Heals Baby Elephants, a book that's coming out, and she is going to tell us all about it. Welcome. Very happy to have you here.
Nice to be here, yes.
So, Mary, this book, Love Heals Baby Elephants, is about baby elephants. How did you get into writing this book? Where did this come from?
Well, my doctoral dissertation was about healing, positive transformations after extreme trauma. And so I have a tremendous amount of research on that. I've written on that with people. So when I started to notice what was happening with these little calves and how they had this tremendous PTSD.
Elephant calves.
Elephant calves.
And why did they have tremendous PTSD?
Because they watched their families slaughtered and massacred for ivory. Because they don't have any ivory on them, sometimes the poachers don't mess with them and they just leave them. Mostly they get killed by lions, and then the other thing was they get emaciated. So luckily, a couple of them get rescued. And of the ones rescued, about 50% of them die.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, in part, that's because by the time they're found, they're dehydrated, or they haven't had their mother's milk, or they have some wounds from predators. And then there's another thing of it.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, a lot of them just die of a broken heart because they've lost their family. And if they have anything medically going on, it cuts down their immune system. So that if they're struggling with dehydration or struggling with some kind of immune problem where they have a wound, their immune system is compromised because they go into shock. Now what happens when they're pulled into the orphanage is they believe that the people there are going to kill them. And the reason why is they saw people slaughtering their whole family, and they're just traumatized beyond belief. So what the keepers do is they bring them into the other little baby elephants. And the other little baby elephants come out and wrap their little trunks around them.
Oh, and comfort them.
Yeah, and then they kind of have a sense that maybe it's going to be safe, and I'm not going to be killed, and it helps. And then they notice that the baby elephants have a friendly relationship to the keepers, and they wrap their little trunks around the
And they
keepers,
get to trust.
and they start to trust gradually. It takes a while.
How long does it take till they start trusting people again?
Well, typically they'll be put in a stall, and they'll be, if they're healthy enough, they'll be raging against the stall, and it'll take a couple of days for them to have interactions with the other ones, and then know that the keepers are safe. So then what they do is they release them out to the fields with the other ones, because they don't really like to be in that enclosure and feel like they're in prison.
Of course.
So it's a gradual process. They have to go through shock.
Well, yes. Yeah, we have a little menagerie here.
We have a couple of dogs here that are wanting our attention, yeah.
Right.
We have Garth down there. Garth is a therapy dog. He's my therapy dog.
Yeah, well, this is Mr. Darcy, who's been in several shows.
Right.
So, so Mary, I really am so impressed at the way that you've gone to Africa and adopted elephants. How did you get interested in this in the first place? What was the first time, and what was that all like for you?
Well, in 2006, I adopted my first baby elephant, and this is before.
And what made you do that?
Oh, they're just so cute.
Well,
And
they
then
are. Yeah.
What is cuter than a baby elephant, except Garth maybe down there?
No, Mr. Darcy. Yes. Right.
They're cute, and then you just feel so compassionate about the stories of them losing their whole family.
Oh, it's horrible.
You just get into that.
How can people adopt elephants? I want to get back to you in a second, but how?
Well, I think the major place, there's several of them. The major place that people know about is the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Kenya. But there's also this one in Zimbabwe. After there were calves that were sold to China against the outrage of everybody in the United States, all the conservationists. and they rejected 3 of them because one of them had a tail missing and one of them had some wounds, and they were sent to an orphanage in Zimbabwe. And I think because the David Sheldrick orphanage has a lot of funding, I think for people to help, it might be good to do some of these lesser known ones in really poor countries, like the one in Zimbabwe. I think it's called Elephant Orphanage or something in Zimbabwe.
And so you adopted an elephant, and then you went to visit him?
It was a process. So I adopted an elephant, and then I started. At that time, I was painting. I was a painter of animals.
Right. I have one of your little coasters right here, which is really cool. So
okay,
this is a miniature one of Mary's paintings, which are wonderful.
Yeah. And I actually went to Africa to get some photos for more paintings and to see the orphanage and adopt a new baby elephant, because by that time mine had been shipped about 100 miles away to this place where they interact with wild elephants. So she was in the orphanage, and then she
sort of a halfway house for elephants.
It's a halfway house. So what happens is they spend 3 years in the nursery, and then after they're no longer dependent on milk and they have a little bit of skills, they're shipped 100 miles away, and they're always shipped with their best girlfriends. I say girlfriends because all of the ones that I adopted are girlfriends, but the boys go with their boyfriends. And
they're buds.
Yeah, they're buds.
Yeah.
Because it's horrible to interrupt their social bonds. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
So
they're a lot like people.
Oh, yeah. Oh, very much. Yeah, they have the same neurobiology. They have a better memory than us. They're very compassionate. They grieve and mourn. They certainly have a tremendous amount of trauma, the same that we do over loss and suffering.
Yeah.
So they interact about 7 years in this rehab place 100 miles away in Tsavo National Park. And there they interact with the wild herds so that they learn the wild language and they can pick up skills about surviving in the wild. Eventually they're adopted. Now, some really interesting things are that they make friends with these wild herds, and they have something called a wild sleepover, whereby some kind of telecommunication, they know to appear at the gate, and their wild friends pick them up, and they go off into the night for a sleepover with the wild ones.
Okay, so I have to stop you here. So it's not really telecommunication, like, they call each other in their cell phones.
Right.
It's like telekinesis, right?
They're
right.
They're
Oh,
psychic.
Yeah.
They're very psychic.
Okay,
yeah.
good. All right. So
they have some kind of mental connection where they know they're supposed to be waiting.
Yeah.
Right.
Those big ears, Right?
Yeah. And so but it's kind of scary to be out there in the night because the lions are around. So if they get scared, the wild ones will bring them back to the orphanage in the middle of the night. I mean, isn't that pretty smart?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another really smart thing. So now, as you know, there's a tremendous amount of poaching, and these wild bulls get hit by these poison arrows. And 3 wild bulls recently got hit by poison arrows, and they can only survive, a short amount of time before the poison just goes through the system. So they knew, one of them had mated with an ex-orphan that was wild. They knew to come back to the rehab place where people were. I mean, people had shot them. They knew to come back because they communicated with the other elephants that it was safe. And so they came back, the people called the vets took the poison out, and they all made a complete recovery. So look at that communication.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, no, that is amazing. And you've been photographing elephants and lions and tigers and bears too. Not in Africa, but
yeah.
But all kinds of animals since 2006? Was that the first time?
It was around 2010 that I seriously got into photography, and then I just went to get paintings to get photos for paintings, but. If you're out in the wild in Africa, it is such a breathtaking experience, and I just love being out in nature, listening to the sounds, and going through the bush looking for leopards and lions. Well, when you're looking for leopards or lions, the way that you find them is by listening, because what happens is you listen to the bird and monkey calls, and they'll tell you exactly where the big cats are.
Really?
Yeah, so and so I learned to kind of like listen and smell.
You're going to become like Jane, in the jungle,
Well, I mean, your senses open up in a different way. And you get such a appreciation for nature and, of course, these animals. So I just kind of got really pulled into it. Or some of my African photography friends, we say that we need a 12-step meeting because we're really addicted and we go back all the time.
See how it could be addictive. And Mary's photographs are amazing. And she has now put them into her book, Love Heals Baby Elephants, which is about how elephants learn to survive and their healing process and how that relates to trauma in human beings. And so you can see these in her book, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the book and when did you decide to write it, and what was that process like for you?
I wrote a first draft probably like a year and a half ago, and then I went to Kenya just this last May, June, and I got some new photos, and after that I started really to put it together. So, but the research on how people come back from horrific loss is something that I did a whole doctoral dissertation on. I wrote a book on how people come back from loss. It's called Undaunted Spirits, Portraits of Recovery from Trauma. I interviewed Max Cleland, who was blown apart by a grenade in Vietnam and then went on to be a U.S. Senator. I interviewed Elie Wiesel, who I also mentioned in this book because it's about the Holocaust, and this is an elephant Holocaust that I'm mentioning. So I interviewed like very important and interesting people like Jeb Stuart Magruder of Watergate, Ann Caput, a nurse who was tried for murder, Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes. I mean, really fascinating people because they had done very well coming back from loss.
Yeah.
And so then when I started to notice what was happening to these baby elephants, I just applied all that knowledge and all that research to what was happening to the elephants. And I thought I would have been finished maybe 3 months ago, but then the whole thing with Cecil the lion happened.
Oh, my God.
So what that spoke to me about is that there was this tsunami of outrage, and people were really getting behind the theme of abusing animals and killing animals for our greed and profit and seeing them as objects that we can just destroy at whim, which is all what the ivory thing is about. I mean, the ivory crisis is about valuing objects over life. And like, what is wrong with us as human beings that we think this little statue on a shelf is more important than the baby? And the elephant, more than life.
I know. You're right.
I mean, it's just so bizarre. And one of the things that Elie Wiesel told me, I mean, when I was speaking with him, interviewing him for my last book, he said when he was in the camps, he wondered why the world was so silent. And he said, how could human beings imagine something like that and then do it?
Right.
So similarly, how can we as human beings take the wisest, most brilliant, compassionate, loving animals and cut them up and turn them into statues on a shelf? How can we imagine something like that, and how can we do it?
Well, I'm really glad that you wrote it, and I hope that this book touches people to become active and to stand up the way you are. And so, Mary, what have I not asked you that we can illuminate everyone about that you would like to say?
Well, let's see. I'm involved in the Boston part of the Boston March for elephants and rhinos. We haven't talked about rhinos, too, and that's
right.
I cover them in the book. It's not the main topic of interest, but there's also a lot of horrific, or just as equally bad, horrific things happening to them. So that's another topic of, our waste, and they have the medicinal effects of chewing your fingernails, and so there's because of superstition. And okay, so they're really
wait a minute, they have the medicinal effects of chewing your fingernails. What?
Because they're made out of keratin, the same that our fingernails are.
And so it's medicinal to chew your fingernails?
No, I'm saying
So,
that,
I was going to start chewing the food.
I'm saying that this is superstition, and that's medically.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's medically as
Okay.
important.
All right.
As,
Well,
yeah.
then I won't. I don't have any anyway. So.
Yeah.
So, but okay. So rhinos are in the book, and then I know the book is also, you talk about animal behavior and play, and it's a fascinating read. So Mary's book is going to be on Amazon very shortly. She has a new site for it, lovehealsbabyelephants.com.
And the subtitle is Rebirthing Ivory Orphans.
Rebirthing Ivory Orphans. And it's also, as she said, about rhinos, and she discusses other animals. Mary is a psychologist with a practice in Beverly.
My dog, Garth, is a therapy dog, and he comes to the office, and everybody gets licks and stuff from him and hugs.
That's so cute. So she is accessible by the web if you want to reach out to her, and I hope everyone will read her book. And Mary, I just think that it's such a touching book, and I'm so grateful that you wrote it, and I'm so happy to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny.
Thanks for being with us.
Okay, thank you.
So again, this is Jenny Hudson and The Author Connection. You can check out more shows on theauthorconnection.net and also at merrimackmedia.com. See you next.
Hi everyone, it's Malco from Contemporary Books. Always a pleasure to join you guys here for another episode of The Author Connection. With nights getting longer and the weather making its transition to the cold, I think it's officially the start of reading marathon season. I know for myself, reading a bunch of books back to back is the best way to make it through a cold and gray time of year. I have a lot of interesting books that I'm reading at the moment, but the book that I just finished now is definitely worth staying indoors for. Evangeline, the Seer of Wall Street, is by Clint Adams and is a historical account of one of America's first businesswomen. Being a trailblazer is certainly never easy, but in the early 20th century, Evangeline Adams finds herself against an uphill battle against misogyny and classism as she tries to legitimize her work as an astrologer. As a headstrong and independent woman, she finds herself facing tremendous odds when she moves from provincial Boston to New York City in order to start up a consulting firm. The road is never easy for a pioneer, and the story of one of America's first female entrepreneurs makes for a great tale about having the courage to follow your calling and to be yourself. The author Clint Adams prefaces the book by stating that he was wrongly informed that he was a descendant of President John Adams, and in his quest to discover more about his lineage, learns that another famous member of the family, Evangeline Adams, also had an equally impressive and relevant story to tell. Although the author is not related to either of the Adams, he still utilizes research to bring Evangeline's story to life. The novel is told in a first-person narrative, and because of the stylistic choice, readers quickly forget that there is a male author behind this powerful female voice. Evangeline comes to life in the first few lines alone, using historically accurate diction and euphemisms that was simple and easy to read. Since the story was so complex, it made sense that the language was simple and easy to follow along. Another great facet of the book was the effortless way of astrological facts were weaved into the story. For example, when speaking about her sister Sabine, Evangeline ponders that when a Scorpio is ill, everyone must know about it and suffer along with them. So it's these small details that Evangeline picks up about the people around her that demonstrate how well the author did his research on astrology. Evangeline's story also weaves through a lot of different conflicts. There's her inner conflict in which she deals with issues such as first love and learning to accept herself for who she is. And then on the other hand, she's dealing with outward conflicts such as trying to legitimize astrology as an exact science and trying to fit into a man's world. With a book that has so many different kinds of conflicts, both these struggles are beautifully balanced throughout the story. It's further added to the enjoyment of reading this book. Oftentimes, the difficulty that comes from trying to write a historical novel is trying to bring recognizable figures to life. In Evangeline's journey, there's no shortage of big names. She rubs elbows with some elite figures such as J.P. Morgan and King Edward of England. But despite the amount of information that other readers may know about these figures, the author did a good job in humanizing these powerful people. For example, J.P. Morgan comes across as a soft-hearted man despite his headstrong personality. And then there's King Edward, a carefree figure who is set on enjoying his life on his own terms. These small details brought famous characters to a whole other dimension. Evangeline, the Seer of Wall Street, is a novel with a great story to tell and a very likable character at the heart of its story. This historical account of a trailblazing entrepreneur is a novel that carries readers through Evangeline's brave, uphill battle in trying to be a businesswoman in what was, and still is, predominantly a man's world. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I hope you do too. So that's it for this week. I'll be back next time with another great book recommendation.